Hi, this is a presentation of Group 19. In the following 50 minutes, we will be sharing our analysis and suggestions concerning the Duvel-Moortgat case study. We hope you enjoy.
Within the following 3 years, Duvel sales are predicted to increase by 50%. Given that the central warehouse is already at full capacity, the issue becomes one of determining whether to go with a central, decentralized, or hybrid approach. The solutions have benefits and drawbacks. We analyzed the existing scenario and modeled it into what we believe is the best course of action to take, concentrating on the French market. Furthermore, the supply chain must be consistent with the company's competitive strategy, which emphasizes high responsiveness to customers.
We first derived the appropriate inventory policy for both SKUs using the ABC product classification system. Viewing product A is characterized by high volumes, low inventory lines, and is a fast-moving product, we opt for a continuous review policy. In contrast, product C, encountering high variability and low volumes and is a slow-moving product, a periodic review policy seems more appropriate. Additionally, based on an initial visual analysis of the sales, we identified a review period of 21 days. However, later when testing for robustness, this might be subject to change. Currently, both SKUs are centrally stored in Belgium and the decentral warehouse in France is replenished daily. By consequence, the lead time for both SKUs is defined as 7 days, the time needed for preparation, transportation, loading and unloading. Next, a service level needs to be set. Our first proposal entailed a lower service level for product C, as due to the volume it would affect less people and it would be harder to achieve because of the high forecast errors. However, we opt not to apply the segmentation as the company's strategy emphasizes a good service level. We believe a common service level can foster the collective pursuit of high responsiveness, and hence we comply with the company's current targeted service level of 96%, as a higher service level would demand exponential growth in safety stock, while a lower is not in line with the company's strategy. The results can be found on the next slide. Scrutinizing seasonality, forecast, and actual sales, a couple of observations could be made, which led to an optimization proposal. When comparing Q2 to Q4 sales, we observed seasonality was quite limited for SKU A. Further, although the forecast with promotions was more accurate, variance was still high. We discovered two other distinct periods in sales. A first period in which sales are significantly high, from week 20 to week 31, which we will call the peak period, and a second period with more moderate sales in week 1 to 19 and week 32 to 52, further referred to as the base period. Accordingly, we propose setting different continuous review policies and thus a different safety stock and order point for both periods. This leads to a lower average inventory level, which indicates lower holding costs, and it could also save 6 trucks a year. Following the same method as for SKU A, we found that for SKU C, seasonality between Q2 and Q4 sales was far more pronounced, but even more striking was a disproportionate high peak in week 29. This peak occurred both in forecast and in actual sales and was enhanced by promotions. We further noticed that the periodic review policy, as proposed earlier, could not handle this peak. To manage this, we first proposed Duvel to spread out more its promotions instead of concentrating them on 1 week, as this could significantly reduce variability. Additionally, we suggest a hybrid inventory policy for SKU C. This entails a brief period where a continuous review policy is implemented to sustain the high peak in week 28 and week 29, alongside a global periodic review policy with a review period of 21 days for the remaining weeks. This optimization is not only able to manage the peak, but also comes with significant cost and space savings. Average inventory level goes down by 38%, and 2 truck transports a year are saved. The results of both optimizations can be found on the next slide.
As there are two different kinds of products, namely A SKU and C SKU, we recommend using a different warehousing strategy for each type of product. First, as mentioned before, the A SKU has a high demand and low variability, thus is a fast-moving item. This enables to make products according to the demand forecast, so make to stock, and thus anticipate future demand. Furthermore, this type of product is unique for the French market. As push systems ensure fast responsiveness and order fulfillment, this strategy seems to be the most appropriate for product A. Consequently, we suggest adopting a decentral warehousing strategy and look for an additional storage space in France. Working with a 3PL company seems most appropriate because firstly, it's an easy and fast solution. Further, the warehouse is immediately operational as the building is already equipped and provides capable personnel. The solution is also very flexible because everything is a variable cost. Moreover, it is easy to expand when Duvel grows even further. The details of the strategy for SKUA can be found in the table on the next slide. The second kind of product, the C SKU, has a lower demand and a higher variability than the A SKU and thus is a slow-moving item. Because of the variability, forecasting the proper amount of beer is more challenging. Hence, a pull strategy seems more appropriate. Furthermore, due to the higher variability, a larger safety stock will be required. However, when the safety stock is stored central and thus aggregated, the safety stock can be reduced. Therefore, product C should remain central. As product A is from now on stored in a decentral warehouse in France, storage space becomes available at the central warehouse for product C. Since Duvel needs an additional warehouse in France, it would also be an option to cross-dock product C at the warehouse of the 3PL. The details of this strategy can again be found in the table on the next slide.
Once model has been developed, we explored its robustness against unforeseen events. Maintaining a high service level is critical for Duvel Moordgat. Therefore, when an event like this occurs, we investigate the fulfillment of actual sales and look for ways to mitigate the problem by adjusting the service level and truck count. For starters, we consider a delivery delay of several days, for example due to a 3-day entrance ban for trucks leaving Belgium. Because both products' peak and base periods span a substantial number of days, the ending inventory will never fall below 0, confirming its resilience. Secondly, we check the model stiffness against a 5 truckload promotion. We may conclude that our model for the A SKUs can endure such an event because its ending inventory is 7 times the promotion. On the contrary, because for the C SKUs the inventory policy is periodic, and as the order up to level and average daily demand is substantially smaller, it cannot resist such a risk event in the base period. However, this would be doable during the peak season with a continuous review if we increase the number of trucks from 1 to 5, indicating we could adapt the periodic inventory policy to a continuous one in the base period. This will bring along large expenditures. Lastly, since the inventory is fairly substantial, long-term negative effects on the demand will result in huge costs for both SKUs. To summarize, we advocate for a trade-off between being highly responsive and paying a high inventory cost.
So for the next question, we again build further upon the already optimized model. Here, the question was to compare the current model where we assume an always outbound sales preparation time of 36 hours with an alternative model with a variable preparation time. The general consequence of this change is that you remove the worst case buffer, which can be inefficient and increase the cost artificially. On the flip side, you introduce variability. On average, this means a decrease of 16 hours in the outbound preparation time. Starting with the A SKU, we see a decrease of the average total lead time from 7 weeks to 6 weeks, 6 days, and 8 hours. In these tables, you can see the calculations for the safety stocks and reorder points during both periods. The most important key takeaway is that during the base period, the average inventory levels are expected to decrease with 1%, and during peak period, the average inventory level is expected to decrease with only 0.4%. Repeating these calculations for the C SKUs reveals a much more interesting impact. Here, the 16-hour decrease in outbound sales preparation time has a much bigger impact on the total average lead time. It decreases from 7 to 6 days and 8 hours. Because of this impact, we see a 2.3 and 3.8 decrease in average inventory levels during base and peak periods, respectively. The downside is that in the alternative model, we lose a buffer which can reduce punctuality and will harm the perceived service level. The percentage improvements for A SKU are not that huge. In absolute terms, however, it is definitely noticeable. However, since the A SKUs are really the core product of Duvel Moordgat, we think that the alternative model might have too big of a negative impact on their customers and on their brand reputation. Then, for the C SKU, we see that the cost of this artificial buffer is very large, so here we do recommend to use the alternative model whenever selling to on-trade customers. Since off-trade customers impose financial penalties, we recommend to keep using the buffer. Next up, we look at the impact of changing the promised delivery time to French customers from the current situation of D+2 to D+4 and D+7. Since we can assume that all sales are to on-trade customers, we will use the variable outbound sales preparation time for the C SKU as previously discussed. Starting with the increase of 5 days to D+7, we can easily calculate the impact. Safety stock for the A SKU is expected to rise with 5% on average. The C SKU during base periods will rise with 8.8% and a whopping 33.8% during peak. Based on these figures, we can quickly see that this is a way too radical change. So obviously, increasing the delivery time with only 2 days results in a lower impact. But still, for the A SKU, we see a relatively large increase of 3% in the safety stock. The C SKU safety stock will need to grow at 3.6% during base period, and again with a very large number during peak. Firstly, we already knew that D+7 is just too costly, so we don't recommend this. Secondly, for D+4, during the peak periods, the safety stock sees exuberant growth figures, and so here we also recommend to stick with the current delivery times. However, during base period, the question becomes, we have the fastest offering in the market, but is this worth it? Duvel Moordgat will need to make the trade-off between the transportation costs to deliver in 2 days versus the cost of increasing the safety stock with 3 to 4% when you say you will deliver in 4 days.
In order for Duvel and a 3PL company to work together, a contract is needed. To make sure that the contract is mutually beneficial, we need to consider both of their interests. The 3PL company prefers fast-moving items, as for every pallet that comes in and goes out, they receive money. Next, they don't want their warehouse to be empty, as this comes along with an opportunity cost. For Duvel, it is important that there is enough storage capacity so that they can satisfy the demand within the time frame set and thus guarantee the service level of 69%. Furthermore, a reliable and professional 3PL company is wanted, as they will deliver their products to their customers. According to our opinion, a quantity flexibility contract will be best in serving both their interests. This type of contract requires the 3PL to offer the customer a predetermined maximum amount of storage capacity, while it also requires Duvel to pay for at least a predetermined minimum amount of storage space. Because a 3PL company typically serves several customers with one warehouse, this contract allows the 3PL to minimize the risk of not using all their storage space by allowing them to play with the capacity allocated to each client. Because Duvel's monthly demand varies, it would be beneficial for Duvel to be able to adjust the needed storage capacity as the demand becomes clearer. As a result, storage capacity better matches actual demand, which will result in cost savings. The quantity flexibility contract has 3 variables: the initial order quantity, alpha and beta. First, we calculated the local optimum, therefore we used the cost of overage of €7, as this is the price Duvel has to pay to store the pallet for another additional month, and cost of underage of €40, as this is the price that Duvel has to pay for the emergency solution. Applying the formulas, we obtained an optimal service level of 85% and a local optimum of 663 pallets. Next, the local optimum was set equal to the initial order quantity. These quantity flexibility contracts are often multiple-year contracts, and thus it is advisable to leave room for some slack, so that when Duvel even grows further, this does not cause a problem. Hence, we suggest to set up a contract with an initial order quantity equal to 663 pallets and alpha and beta equal to 20%. Additionally, we recommend Duvel Moordgat to opt for a contract that may be reviewed and adjusted yearly.
We conclude that the optimal answer to Duvel Moordgat's capacity expansion problem is a hybrid solution. For the A SKUs, we advise investing in a decentral warehousing strategy, which will be implemented using a twofold continuous review policy, so different safety stock levels for the peak and the base period. For the C SKUs, we recommend maintaining a central warehousing strategy. The disproportionate peak can be mitigated using a temporary, continuous policy, as opposed to the periodic review policy which is implemented during the remaining weeks. From the checks against the different risk events, we can conclude that we have a highly robust model. Furthermore, we analyzed an alternative model with the current worst-case model that assumes a fixed outbound preparation time of 36 hours. We suggest Duvel Moordgat to make use of the alternative model with the variable transportation lead times for the C SKUs in the case of sales to on-trade customers, but maintain the current model in case of the sales to off-trade customers. For the A SKU, we recommend sticking with the current model, which includes buffer. Next, we analyzed the impact of increasing promised delivery times. We believe that the optimal way of operating during the peak periods is to keep delivery times on D+2 for both the SKUs. For the base periods, unless we inquire the data on the transportation costs for each delivery time, we suggest Duvel Moordgat not to change the delivery times during the base periods as well. Lastly, to obtain a mutually beneficial contract for the 3PL company and Duvel, we suggested a quantity flexibility contract with an initial order quantity equal to 663 with a range of 20%. As a result, storage capacity can better match the actual demand. Using this contract, the 3PL business can reduce the likelihood of not using all the available storage space, as this costs them money. Further, the tool can adjust the needed storage capacity as demand becomes clearer when the sales date approaches.